want to welcome you back to our fall message series, Living Our Faith in a World of Faiths. And for those of you who have not been here, we have been recognizing that our neighbors in this life are people of all different faiths. However it might have been at one time in America, now all around us are people who come out of different ways of believing, ways of thinking about God. And it's important for us to be neighbors. It's important for us to know how to listen and how to love. The world is becoming very, very small. And so it is that we have invited people from this fall from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church. We invited someone from Islam, a Muslim. And many of you remember Hazm. And then a couple of weeks ago, we had Rabbi Benjamin Sendro, who was here from the Jewish faith. And today, we're going to have a great opportunity to hear about the Hindu faith. And I'm very excited about our guest this morning. Her name is Indu Vesudevan. And just so that you know how common things can be, sometimes we think we have very different beliefs, but the practicalities of me saying, Indu, I'd really like for you to come and speak. Well, she has a Sunday school class that she teaches, and that means she's got to get on the phone and find volunteers. And any of us who've been in church know this sort of thing that we have to do to get ourselves free. So she has shaken free. She's got someone teaching her class that she teaches this morning. And I'm very excited that she is here. So Indu, would you please come forward? You are about to speak with a few hundred of what will now be your really good friends. So come.
Thank you so much.
Yes. We're blessed to have you here. And please share with us. We're very excited to hear what you have to say.
Thank you.
Yes.
I must say it's a bit of a challenge, always, to be asked to speak to 10,000 years of history in 20 minutes or less. And so, Pastor Howell, if you don't mind, could you give me the high sign if I'm going too long? Thank you. So I thought, what can I tell you that would give you Hinduism in very brief capsule form? So I thought 7 things about Hinduism that you should know. The first is, there is really no ism in Hinduism. Hinduism is a very diverse faith. It's not a monolithic faith with a head Hindu at the top and everybody else following the rule. As it has often been said, a lot of Indians, no chiefs. So the proper name for Hinduism is Sanatana Dharma. That means the eternal path. And we mean that because it is followed everywhere in many ways. We believe that there is no one single way to salvation. We believe that everyone finds this destination of oneness with God. But we may all come to that through many different practices. So we say Sanatana Dharma not because the path is exactly the same step by step, but because the origin of the path and the destination of the path are the same. Within Hinduism, there is a great deal of diversity. Could we have the next slide, please? There is a great deal of diversity in Hinduism, and it stems from 3 basic causes. The first is that it was not founded by the teachings of one prophet. It coalesced over thousands of years as a way of thinking and a way of living that led to a transcendent experience, to the experience of the presence of God in people's lives, the presence of the divine and the sacred in our lives. The second reason for that diversity is that India, where Hinduism was born, is a very diverse nation. It's more properly understood as a subcontinent than as a country. We speak 14 different national languages, none of which even share an alphabet. Think Europe. with more alphabets. Indians typically don't identify themselves actually as Indian. We tend to identify ourselves by particular cultural groups or particular linguistic groups. I'm Tamil, my best friend is Telugu, my daughter is marrying a Punjabi. We are very proud of these cultures, and those cultures are quite distinct, not just because of the language, but because of the different regions, cultures, climates, environments in different parts of India, that we wear different clothes, that we eat different foods, that we sing in different styles, that our architecture, in fact, is different in every part of India. So much so that the Hindu temple of central Indiana, which we just consecrated in its full form a few months ago, if you happen to drive by, as Pastor Howell did, it's at 3350 North German Church Road on the east side, you will find that each of the towers is actually of a different architectural style. They don't look like each other because it is one temple for 10,000 families who've come from lots of different places. Fortunately, we're not congregational worshipers, so we don't all come to the temple at once. But that diversity of culture in India is also reflected in the diversity of Hinduism. The third reason for diversity is that there is a tremendous focus in Hinduism not on one day of salvation, but on each individual's evolution toward liberation. So religion is a map. It's not the destination in itself. It is a guide for us to achieve this goal of oneness with God. My spiritual teacher actually says, it is a grand thing to be born in a religion, but a terrible thing to die in one. Because if all you have is this map and you've missed the experience, then that really hasn't worked. So you must strive individually for this experience of oneness with God. Can I have the next slide? So, as always, I'm a little challenged to ask myself, where do I start? What do I start with? And I thought, well, why don't we start with the beginning? It seems like a logical place. So to tell you a little bit about the Hindu view of creation, in the Rig Veda, which is the most ancient of our scriptures, there is a beautiful poem called The Hymn of the Origin. And in this poem, it says that before there was time, before there was space, there was one. And no attributes are given to this one. We don't say that this one was vast or small. We don't say that it was purple or polka dotted or loving or peaceful. No attributes, because this was pure being. And at some point, the one wished to know itself. And at that moment, one separated itself from itself to know itself. To know, there have to be two things. There has to be someone to do the knowing and something to know. So being separated itself from itself to know itself. At that moment, a vibration came into being, and that vibration is Om. Om is the sound of the Big Bang in Hindu terms. In the wake of this vibration, love and truth came into being, and then from love and truth proceeded all of this physical universe that we see. Could I have the next slide, please? Next slide. So this view of creation actually has several consequences, one of which is that we have to accept that every atom, living and non-living, human and non-human, is part of this original one. It is sacred. Every one of us is sacred. That is why the Hindu gesture of greeting is namaskar, or namaste. Okay? It's a gesture of prayer. It's saying that which is divine in me greets that which is divine in you. So, namaskar, and thank you so much for having me here. Now, to be completely honest with you, although I have flashes, could I have the next slide, please? Although I have flashes of understanding, of experiencing the presence of God, I can see God in my children most of the time. I can see God in the structure of a snowflake. I can see God in the color of the autumn leaves as I was driving here this morning. Andy? I can see God in a rainbow. But there are times when I would say that I'm not feeling the presence of God so much. The person who cut me off on 465 as I was trying to get off on Michigan Road, not feeling his divinity so much. Okay? The other last winter, when I was caught out in an ice storm, I did not feel the divinity of that ice storm when I was slithering across the street. So we have to ask ourselves, why? Why is it when every atom of this creation is radiating its divinity, when I feel this divinity in flashes, why don't I live in the constant consciousness of God's presence? Why don't I live in that bliss all the time? And the answer to our sages was that it is in the nature of the human mind. Just as a little exercise, what are the first two words a toddler learns after mommy and daddy? No, and what's the other one? Mine, exactly. We go through our lives dividing the world into me and not me, right? Me, Hindu, others, non-Hindu. Me, a woman, others, not always women, okay? We may feel that we are me and Syrian refugees, or me and some presidential candidates. We feel that we divide the world into me and that which is not me. The other thing is that we tend to divide the world into the things that are pleasant to us and the things that are unpleasant to us, okay? So we don't accept all our experiences as God's grace. Our failures, our challenges, our setbacks, God, where are you? Where are you when I need you? So we have to get some way of disciplining what in Hinduism we call the monkey mind, the mind that leaps from thought to thought, from desire to desire, that is not disciplined. And a lot of Hinduism is really not so much about doctrine, but discipline. How do we control this mind? My spiritual teacher tells the story of a farmer who had too much to do by himself. So he hired an assistant, and he lucked out because this assistant could do everything twice as fast as he could. Well, this was wonderful, and the to-do list kept getting shorter and shorter until he found that with his assistant he had a very strange problem, and that was that this assistant would go off and undo or redo what he did before if he didn't have anything else to do. So if he was asked to take the cows out to pasture, well, he would bring the cows back before they'd even had a mouthful of grass. If he was asked to water the fields, he would flood the fields. And the farmer wondered, what can I do? Because he doesn't want to lose this guy. He's really good, but he needs to learn to control him. So he says, you know this tree here? I want you to climb up this tree. And this guy's a real go-getter, so he says, sure, I'll climb the tree, and what do you want me to do when I get up there? He says, well, come on down. And then come ask me, do you have something for me to do? And if you don't, well, go back up the tree. Now, my spiritual teacher says that is actually what meditation does. It makes your mind your servant, your assistant, but it lets you understand that your mind is not the totality of who you are. If you can remember the last time you were sad or angry, you probably remember that as a disturbance of your natural state. That part of you which is a witness to this, that understands, oh, this is different. This is uncomfortable. This is something that's caused by an external source that I have to go fix. That part of you is living in eternity. That part of you, you want to get hold of. So, yoga, that's the next slide, please. We think of yoga as being three kinds of yoga, and yoga actually comes from the Indo-Aryan root word yug, which comes out in English as words like yoke and junction. It all means to join, okay? How do you join yourself with this eternal part of you? And how do you join this eternal part of you to the eternal that is all around us? And there are three paths. They're not mutually exclusive, but there are three that, depending on where you are in your life or what you are in your life, those are paths that work for people. One is the path of spiritual knowledge. So learning about your faith or reflecting on your faith through the lens of another faith, that would be considered the yoga of spiritual knowledge. So you are all doing yoga right now. There is also the yoga of devotion. My mother, for instance, wakes up in the morning, and she is one of those people who is always elegant. She treats her body with great respect, but because for her, that is the temple of the soul, the temple of God. Her environment is impeccably clean because she believes that her home is where God is. And all through the day, she does everything with the remembrance of God's presence until at night, before she goes to bed, she will actually sing God a lullaby and hope that God gets some rest while we're trying to be quiet. For others, for myself, I would say that the yoga of service is what helps me break through the ego. I'm a writer by profession, and I have to tell you that when I'm thinking of what my editor is going to say, what I'm going to get paid, what my next assignment is going to be, I get writer's block. But if I'm writing thinking that I can help somebody, that I can get some ideas out into the community that are worth thinking about, that create peace or create harmony, that kind of writing does itself. I can't take any credit for it. So those yogas are ways of joining yourself to a higher self. Now, we believe that the natural course of human life sort of helps you through this journey. So the first is the student phase, which is one where the community takes care of you. You're not required to hold a job. You are actually asked not to have relationships with people of the opposite sex. You're asked to focus, because this time is never going to be given to you again. This time is given to you to learn about yourself, to really find the divinity that's at the heart of your soul. The second phase is the phase of marriage. This is when you literally step into the duties of community. And having learned to find God in yourself, you now learn to see God all around you. First in the people you love, in your family, and then in the people of your community. And certain duties like charity and service to the community are part of your life as a householder. The third phase of life is that of the retiree, and this is again a drawing inward. It's like breathing out and breathing in, or the heart beating forward and beating back. So if you've had one movement inward as a student and then a movement outward, your next movement is again inward. So you pull yourself away from your worldly attachments and you learn to see the hand of God in all of the events of your life. And in the fourth, not everybody takes on this fourth, but they leave aside the life of family. And they dedicate themselves entirely to God. And at that point, they become teachers. They become forces of love in the community, and they are supposed to be cared for by the community. They're not asked to hold on to any possessions. Next slide, please. So we also practice 5 values that will help us achieve oneness. One is to seek the truth. For many of us, our senses are passive receptors, and they only engender desire. Okay? Madison Avenue completely understands this. I did an experiment once in my Sunday school class where I'm supposed to be a reasonably good storyteller, and in the class I put down a bowl of M&Ms, and then I told my story, and I thought it was one of my best stories, and I did it with all the voices, and the children seemed to enjoy it, and at the end I asked, "So, any questions?" And the only question anybody had was, "What about the M&Ms?" Right? So that senses tend to distract us from the truth, but the senses can also help us actively seek the truth. We can seek God in all things. I think this is why so many Indians are scientists, because they want to see the hand of God in nature. The second value we practice is right action, and right action is defined universally, I think, in every faith as action that is selfless, that is done for the greater good, that doesn't necessarily have self-interest behind it. The third value we practice is non-possession, and that's why I have this photograph here. This is a photograph of Mahatma Gandhi's possessions at the end of his life. He literally strove not to amass things. So his possessions included a pair of indoor slippers, a pair of outdoor slippers, his scriptures, his glasses, his bowl, and his 3 monkeys that say, "See no evil, hear no evil, speak no evil." The fourth value we practice is purity, and that is a value that means that we strive to find God in every experience. Hindus actually believe not only that there is one God, but that there is only God. There is nothing but God. So we have to strive to understand all of our experiences as grace. This requires thought. It requires single-mindedness. It requires that you look for love with love. The fifth value, and the highest value that we would practice, is nonviolence. And by nonviolence, we don't simply mean don't take a stick and beat somebody with it. That is the crudest definition of nonviolence. Nonviolence is actually, for us, to see the other as yourself. It is an exercise in oneness because you refuse to see others, even those opposed to you, as your enemy. Okay? It is to revere the divine in all things. Now, having said that there is God and only one God, I will tell you that Hindus find many, many ways of thinking about God. And one of the great sayings of Hinduism is, "The truth is one, though the wise may call it by many names." So although we talk about different ways of thinking about God, you have to remember that these are not different entities, but different experiences of the same entity. We use different names for these different ways of thinking. When we think of God as the one who is beyond all forms, beyond all names, who is limitless, then we use the term Atman. When we think of God in terms of God's relationship to the universe, because how do you establish your identity with something that has no attributes when you think of yourself as being all attributes? My driver's license tells me 5'6½", black hair, brown eyes, living on this street, part of this family. Those are all attributes. It is natural for us to want to identify people by attributes. So we can say, how does God relate to the universe? Well, God relates to the universe as the creator. I think most faith traditions would agree to that. God also relates to the world as the one who sustains it through grace. And we can also see God as the principle of change and evolution in the universe. And for each of these, we have a different name: Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And if you happen to actually read the prayers addressed to these different names, you'll find that they're all speaking of God as the creator, and God as grace, and God as the one who impels change. Because, ultimately, God is not a department store. And it's something that I feel is very often misunderstood about Hinduism. We see it in textbooks all the time. In fact, ISTEP, at one time, wanted the students of Indiana to respond that Hinduism is an example of a polytheistic faith. I would argue that Hinduism is not simply a monotheistic faith, but a monist faith. We don't believe that there is anything other than God. Could I have the next slide, please? We don't think that God is male or female. God is neither male nor female, and so God is often pictured as both male and female to kind of convey that. And when we do this, we think of God as Shakti. Shakti is energy, and in Indo-Aryan languages, like Latin and French and all of the others, all these words have gender. And the word Shakti, which means energy or grace, is a feminine gendered noun, so it's always pictured as feminine. And the way it's usually said is that the creator is really the potential for creation. The manifesting energy of that creation is the word, and the word is always pictured as feminine. God has the potential for grace, but the manifesting energy of that grace that resides at God's heart is compassion. And change and evolution happen, but the manifesting energy of that is the will. So always these are pictured as dualities. We can also think of God as the teaching incarnation. God is incarnated many times on earth as a teaching incarnation, and we use the term avatar. When James Cameron's movie came out several years ago, I said to my son, "Oh, look, James Cameron has made a movie called Avatar." And my son told me, "Mom, that's not Avatar, that's Avatar. That's something else altogether." So, an avatar is a teaching incarnation of God, and we believe it's happened in many traditions. We would actually say, I think many contemporary Hindus would say that Jesus Christ is a teaching incarnation of God. Gautama Buddha is a teaching incarnation of God. We can also think of God as the indweller. God is inside us, in every one of us, speaking to us all the time. My spiritual teacher actually says, God has no devotees. He is your devotee. He's constantly looking, searching, guiding you. We can also think of God as the one who accepts our worship. And again, I think this is another situation where Hinduism is somewhat misunderstood. We have been told that we are idol worshipers. We are not. Actually, the Archa form is one that we have asked God to be present to us, to accept worship. Do we believe that this is the totality of what God is? No. Do we believe that this is where our understanding and experience of God ends? No. This is a way of focusing. This is a kind of sacred art which enables meditation, which allows you to see the highest potential of human life and also to see the eternal that is behind all life. And the seven thing is the seven aspects of a well-lived life. This is a scene from one of our central scriptures. It's called the Bhagavad Gita, and it takes the place in our faith that the Sermon on the Mount has in Christianity. It is the ultimate statement of practical Hinduism. And in this, a king is forced to do battle. It's in a civil war. And he goes out into the battlefield and sees on the other side his friends, his family, and he throws down his weapons and he says, "I will not fight." And God, who is his charioteer, tells him, "So you have accepted the education of a king. You have accepted the privileges of a king, but now you refuse to do the duties of a king because it's unpleasant to you personally? Do you think any of the people out there will die because you caused it? No one dies unless I will it to be so." And then he gives this king the full understanding of what the purpose and duties of a human life should be. And this picture is of that scene in this long poem. It is so important to us that, you know how at weddings here people get 3 blenders? At my wedding, I got 3 versions of this. Okay? I got it on a silver tray that I'm supposed to use during prayer. I got it on a wall hanging, and I got it as a sculpture to put on my bookshelf. So this is a very central thing to us, and these actually represent the 7 aspects of a well-lived life. The first is the horses. There usually are 5 horses. They represent the 5 senses, and they're all, as you can see, careening madly in all directions. But they are being held by the reins of discipline, and God, who is the charioteer, is the one who is in charge of the direction of this chariot. The chariot represents the human body with the soul within it. So this understanding that this body is not all you are, but that it is a vehicle for the service of God, that is one of the concepts of a well-lived life. And then the chariot has, at the top, it has a flag, and that flag shows a monkey in a circle. That monkey is the monkey mind that we talked about, but it is fixed in the service of God. And you'll see that there are, the soul within the chariot is about to shoot an arrow. That arrow is pointed in a direction that God directs, but an arrow is not a boomerang. It does not come back to you. Your actions should not be motivated by what comes back to you, but to do good to the world. And to finish, may I end with a prayer? From untruth, lead us to truth. From darkness, lead us to light. From death, lead us to immortality. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Let there be peace. Let there be always peace. Let there be only peace. I'm breathing again.
You're breathing again. I know you are. I know exactly how you feel. I have to look at these people every Sunday. It's quite a frightening experience in many ways. So in a way, I think for a lot of us, when we think of the Hindu faith, we think of lots of gods. And really what you're saying, let me ask you if this is what you're saying, that really all of the whatever shrines, artwork, are all aspects of what you really believe is just one God or one reality, I guess you would, right? Is that a correct way to say
Yes,
that? Okay, that's good. I was thinking, let's go do something easy here. When I see people, when I see women particularly, Hindu, there's this dot. What, and I don't know with men, but why the dot?
Why the dot?
Sure.
See, and you thought that was an easy question.
I did.
There are 800 million of Hindus in the world, and I will tell you that they don't all think the same about it. For a lot of people, it's just cosmetic. It's like lipstick moved up a few inches, okay? And it comes in all kinds of different colors and shapes and glittery stuff. It's all fun and funky. It can also be, in parts of India, it is actually a symbol of marriage. So only married women will wear it in those parts of India. And it's part of the wedding ceremony when the husband puts the sindoor, the red powder, to make that. In the part of India that I come from, everybody wears it. Okay. Men and women wear it. Women typically wear it in a very distinctive form. Men may just wear a little bit of it, this red powder. And it can be, well, every morning when I do my prayers, I take a little bit of ash and I take a little bit of the sindoor and I put them both on. The ash is what is burnt to, when everything else, non-essential, is burnt away, what's left is the ash. And that is one way of getting to the truth, by saying, well, my possessions aren't me, my job isn't me, my friends aren't me, but that's one way of approaching who you are essentially. The other way is the way of love, which says, well, but my love that I feel for my children, for my husband, for my parents, for my community, for my co-workers, for the environment, all of these things are essentially a part of me. So for me, this means truth and love. And so it's a dedication to truth and love when I put that on. And other people say that it is the third eye. It represents the third eye of the spirit. Some people have told me that it is impossible to hypnotize someone who's wearing this. And other people have told me that putting this here, it's putting a cooling substance over a spot which makes you susceptible to sunstroke. So in a climate like India's, that actually is a medical health necessity, I guess.
Sounds like it's got all the bases covered.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's generally you wear it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think also a lot of us, rightly, wrongly, right? I think we think Hindu, we think red dot, we think cows, right? Cows, something important about cows. They worship cows. And then I think the whole, is that a reincarnation thing? So is there any way you can kind of shortly tie that up?
Okay. Shortly? Okay.
Yes.
So the cow is, basically it's economic. If you have a cow in India, you have a source of protein in terms of milk and cheese and butter and all of those things. Most of us, to practice nonviolence, we do observe some form of vegetarianism, so having a cow is a good thing. Cows are also, they're used as farm, they power farm machinery. They pull carts and so on, so definitely economically it makes sense to have a cow. But also, the cow is a symbol for us of something that gives without any kind of aggression. That, for us, is an example of service and nonviolence, so we revere that in the cow. The third is that all creatures, not simply human beings, are sacred. We would say that the place where rivers come together is sacred because it is a place of unity. We would say that mountains are sacred. We would say that birds are sacred and that animals are sacred. Not because we don't think that divinity exists only in humanity. It exists everywhere. Reincarnation.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have never heard a Hindu wonder about what they were in a previous life
Man,
or
well,
what they're going to be in the next life.
That's amazing, because I see some of these Facebook pages, and some of these folks out here are sure they've been the Queen of Sheba at some point or another.
Well, we're very honored to have the Queen of Sheba in our midst. Hindus generally are not concerned about reincarnation in that sense. We really think of it more as a logical reasoning backward. Okay? So let's say that here is a good person who experiences extraordinary challenges in their lives, who experiences loss in their lives. Do we look at that and say that's just the random cruelty of the universe and say, oh, poor me? Or do we say that perhaps in a previous life or earlier in this life, I failed in compassion, and this experience is being given to me to broaden my compassion, my consciousness? So it is a way of thinking of our lives as being purposeful, this life as being purposeful, okay, as having a particular journey with a goal. We're not really concerned about what happens before or after.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. I'm going to have the band come up. We are going to close with a song here in just a minute. First of all, just thank you so much. You're beautiful.
Thank you.
You're a beautiful spirit, and I'm so glad that not only did we got to meet, but that you had come here. So we'll be out in the lobby if you want to come by and say hi and shake hands and give her blessings and well wishes. Indu Vesudevan, you're terrific. Thank you so much for being here, friends.